Before we start the video, I want to give a very special thank you to Bad Storytelling for lending me his voice for today's video. I will be putting a link to his channel in the description field down below. Make sure you subscribe to there and comment on his latest video that Jensen sent you, if you're not already subscribed. Anyways, thank you guys, and I hope you enjoy today's video. I'm a 31-year-old woman. This happened a few years back. I was walking from a friend's house to meet my son's father, X, at a bar we frequented in those days. It was wintry, icy, and snowing with giant piles of snow all around. I was walking from a friend's house around 9 p.m. down an alley that served as a driveway area for many houses. Not a great neighborhood, but not particularly bad either. I was wearing my apocalypse boots, waterproof, knee-high, winter-proof. I usually have headphones and blaring music while I walk, but that night for some reason I decided not to. In hindsight, that's what saved me. I'm about the equivalent of 2 to 3 blocks away from the bar. There's a younger guy, early 20s, walking about 50 feet behind me. "Hey, you." I turn around. It seems he's talking to someone else. "Hey." I look back and then continue walking. "Yeah, you. No, don't turn around, sweetheart." I start to walk faster as I realize he's getting closer. Ahead of me, I see an SUV running, backed out of a parking spot but blocking my path. I turn around and there's another guy. The door to the SUV opens and there's a couple guys in it looking at me. One gets out and stands by the open door. I turn to look at the guy behind me. Out of freaking nowhere, about 5 more guys come out, surrounding me from a distance, slowly closing in, and then realization that they're hiding behind piles of piled snow behind me. I realize that they're just standing and watching me. A couple of them had their phones out and were recording something that was about to go down. Nobody was smiling, but they were closing in on me, trying to get me to walk to the SUV. Fight or flight kicked in. I decided I didn't want to do what was about to happen. I wanted to catch them off guard. So instead of running forward, I bolted to the left. Thank God for those boots, I could run across the ice no problem. I ended up cutting through a few yards and made it to the bar. Guys trying to get me in your SUV while filming. Let's not meet. When I was younger, every year for Christmas, I would drive upstate to my aunt's house along a stretch of highway. I cannot for the life of me remember the name of this road. All I know is that it runs nearby Akron, New York, at some point. However, most of the drive is through rural areas, with little to no towns nearby. So, it was the dead of night, and my groggy self had gone off at a long shift, and had to drag my ass to my aunt's house since my extended family was expecting me the following morning. Near halfway through the drive, I realized I was low on gas, which irritated me. My brother had told me he had filled it up the day before, so he either forgot or straight up lied. I saw an archaic-looking sign for a gas station off the next road. It wasn't an official road sign, literally a pole with a slab of metal attached with "gas off next exit," or something along those lines painted on. That seemed a little sketchy, but people do the same thing with fruit stands and highways. So, whatever. I pulled off the next exit on some dilapidated country-ass road through dense woods. The whole thing was creepy and surreal. I kept expecting Leatherface to come running out of the trees with a chainsaw. Anyways, eventually I came to the gas station and realized quickly it had been open for years. It was all rusted and the convenience store's roof was caving in. The gas pumps had all been taken out as well. I pulled over to the next of it and checked my gauge. I would probably make it only about half a mile before running out, so I called AAA, and they said they'd send a truck over. Now I played the waiting game. I left my engine on because when the headlights were off, everything was pitch black, and my paranoid self was sitting next to an abandoned gas station in the middle of the forest in complete darkness. So, Most of the wait went uneventful until I sensed movement around the side of the old store, where my lights are pointed. I look up but didn't see anything there, so I looked back down at my phone. Then, over the sounds of the night, I hear someone yell, "Hey buddy, come here," in a demanding tone. I look up and, I shit you not, there's a dude standing by the old store, looking towards me, illuminated by my headlights. He looked like the run-of-the-mill homeless guy. I was honestly spooked, and figured he must have been squatting there. Still watching him, I rolled down my window and yelled something like, "Yeah, what's up?" Still mentally crapping myself. I had my foot ready to floor it out of there at the first sign of trouble. "You got any change?" "Nah, I don't, sorry man." I look up at him. He has this kind of vacant expression and is standing stiff. Then I see more movement. There are heads, about 20 or so heads, peeking around trees beyond the man I'm talking to. I can't see them clearly at all, but they are definitely people. Literally just heads, staring in my direction from around the trees. I see another guy beginning to walk from around the gas station, and I then turned around and sped off. I got as far away from the place as my tank could carry me, and updated AAA on my location. The driver came over and filled me up, and I didn't say anything. But after he left, I wanted to call the cops, so I called the nearest town sheriff department. They said they'd send a trooper over, and I gave them the location. When I got to my aunt's house, they called me back and said whoever there was gone. But they could tell a large number of people had been living there for a while. Blankets, canned food, the usual. The whole situation still freaks me out. But frankly, I consider myself lucky. I'll always have such a creepy story to tell. I'm just glad nothing bad happened. Yeah, and to the creepy dudes at the gas station, let's not meet. For background information, I'm on a volunteer fire department, and this happened a few years ago. During our drills at my former department, our bay doors are open so people have been known to walk by and talk to us, ask us questions, or just look at the trucks. One evening, this dude strolls by, a fellow firefighter from another town, which is uncommon. Firemen stop by other departments all the time when in town. He made his rounds and was talking to my chief, my captain, the young guys, and he made his way over to me and started chatting me up. He was a nice guy and good looking enough. We exchanged Snapchats, and it didn't take long to figure out what a psycho he was. After a week of talking, he messaged me saying, "So, how come you didn't swipe right?" Confused, I asked him what he meant, and then this unfolded. He told me about all of this in an attempt to impress me with how devoted he was. He found me on a dating app, used my picture from the dating app to find my Facebook. Since in my one photo I'm wearing a uniform that had my last name. That was definitely my bad. He then used my profile picture to find out what fire department I was on by looking closely at the fire truck in the background. He told me he walked by my department almost every day to see when we drilled and to spot me. As he's telling me this, I'm confused as hell, and he goes, "I'm having a pretty rough day. If I can come over." Cue to him telling me he's on his way. He used my Snapchat location to find my work and house. My location on everything is now off. When he came to my house, he brought a love letter and gifts. He said he was sorry and confused and just really wanted things to work out. I told him that he needed to leave and never speak to me again, to which he obliged by leaving, saying that it would make me happy. He made maybe 3 to 4 new Snapchats and a Facebook profiles in an attempt to add me back. At one point he got clever and made his Snapchat name Chris Smith 1990, which made me go, "Hey, it's my friend Chris Smith." Lo and behold, it was not Chris Smith. Once I realized it was my friend, but instead the psycho, he asked what I could do to make it up. I texted "get lost and go set yourself on fire." I then got a video of him walking in the woods, and then he set himself on fire. He flicked a lighter over his hand and I thought, yeah, okay. And then his entire hand and arm lit up by a following scream and it cut out. I started to freak out thinking, well, fuck. And immediately got a photo of his hairs and his knuckles burnt off, and his burnt shirt. He was okay and coated his arm in something flammable, but something that wouldn't actually damage him. Blocked again. He fucked off after coming to my house again, and I had a gun in my hand and told him to stop or the cops would be involved. But to be fair, it wasn't loaded. I didn't know how to use it, and I was planning on swinging the thing if it really got bad. So, crazy stalker who set himself ablaze. Let's not meet. So, preface to this is that I was young, maybe 18 or 19, and had no idea what we were getting into. So, my father owns 3 businesses, and was actively dating his business partner, and was providing for her. She also made advances on me, which kind of creeped me out. She would buy us all food, and at first I was grateful. But then I started becoming nervous as she wanted to be alone with me a lot. My father ended up getting married, but didn't tell her, and she got really upset at him, and told me not to tell her. She came to my job and demanded to see my father, to which I told her he wasn't here. She screamed at me and said we would soon regret it. Due to the disturbing nature, I called the cops and all they did was take my name and didn't actually look into it. So fast forward, I come home around 12 midnight, as I had just came from my second job. Dead tired from school and work, I ate and crashed on my bed. It had to be at least 3 in the morning when I heard my door open. At first I didn't move because I assumed it was my calico cat, Misty, pawing at my door as she liked to sleep with me. When I groaned her name and she didn't answer, it struck me strange, but I wasn't worried until I felt a presence standing over me. I quickly woke up and discovered my father's ex in our house above me, crazy-eyed. She was screaming, saying how she would get her revenge on my father. I quickly rolled on my bed and ran past her and called the authorities. She openly tried to fight my father's wife and tried to stab my dad. The police came and arrested her on the spot. That was the scariest shit I've ever been through, and I'm glad I won't see her again. Now I sleep with a blade next to my bed and a taser. Please be careful, as you never know who may pay you a visit late at night. I live in a small town in South Africa. Near my town there's a large patch of woods, and since the outbreak of the coronavirus, I haven't been in the woods for a very long time, until yesterday. So my friend called me to ask if I wanted to join him and a few other mates to play a game of paintball in the woods, and obviously I was keen. I got my paintball gear and a gun and headed off to my mate's place. There was 6 of us: Chise, Liam, Matt, Joey, Steven, and obviously me. We headed off to the woods, but made a few stops to fill up on petrol and get some gas for our paintball guns. When we finally got to the woods, we parked the cars, got in our gear, and ventured down the woods to find the perfect spot to paintball. Eventually we got deep enough to an area with sufficient cover and space to play a good game of capture the flag. We played a couple games, and since it's winter, it got dark real quick, but we planned for this and brought our flashlights and decided to play a couple of night games, which is extremely hard, especially in the forest we're in. During one match, Joey and I decided to sit out because we were both tired and just needed a quick breather, and the others continued to play from a significantly good distance away from us. While we were chilling, I was rolling up a joint. Yes, I'm a pothead. And Joey went to go take a piss a couple of meters away from me. While I was busy rolling, I had the flashlight pointed towards myself. Since there was no other light to allow me to see what I was doing and around me, it was completely dark. I couldn't even see 2 meters ahead of myself because of how dark it was. Suddenly I heard footsteps coming my way, but I thought it was Joey, and I soon realized I couldn't see any light from his flashlight. So now I was more vigilant, but still relaxed, thinking he was just trying to play a prank on me or something. But the footsteps stopped a few meters away from me, so I lifted up my flashlight and pointed in the direction where I heard the footsteps, and scanned the area, but just saw bushes and trees. And I just thought maybe it might be Joey hiding in the bushes, or behind a tree waiting to give me a jump scare. Then I heard footsteps coming in the opposite direction, and when I looked, I could see it was Joey, because he was holding his flashlight. That's when I stopped what I was doing and picked up my flashlight and paintball gun. And when Joey reached me, I whispered, "Bro, I think there's someone over there." And Joey obviously didn't believe me, and just said to me to stop being a baby. But he soon regretted saying that because I decided to do one last scan of where I heard the footsteps. And to my horror, I saw someone peeking and staring right at me from behind a tree, probably 10 or 11 meters away from us. I just shouted, "What the actual F?" And when Joey heard me say this, he looked at me, and then where the man looked, and instantly jumped up picking up his paintball gun as well. We stared at each other for at least 2 minutes, but it felt like forever, until he stepped out from behind the tree. He was a large man, at least 6 feet, was honestly filthy like he hadn't taken a bath in years. He was wearing baggy ripped up jeans and just an old dirty zipped up bomber jacket. Plus, we could see that he was on something, or he was just batshit crazy. He was holding something behind his back. He finally said, "What are you guys doing out here when it's so dark?" We couldn't even answer him because of the shock we're in. Joey stuttered with fear in his voice. We were just leaving." But the man nodded his head in disagreement and said, "No, you're not. Your friends are still playing the game." I felt a shiver down my spine. "How about we play a game of our own for a while we wait for your friends?" And that is when he finally showed us what he was holding behind his back. It was a large machete. That's when I knew we had to get out of there. So I aimed my paintball gun in the toughest way I could possibly muster up. I told him, "Leave now or I will shoot," even though I had about 6 or 7 paintballs loaded, and Joey did the exact same by aiming his gun at the man, even though he had no paintballs in his gun. But he didn't even flinch, but did something that honestly made my skin crawl. He just smiled and said, "The game starts now." And suddenly he rushed at us, and so I told Joey to run while I fired my last bullet at him. And luckily I shot him in the head, which caused him to fall, so that was our chance to book it and link up with our other friends. As soon as we started running, we heard footsteps again, and he was actually gaining on us again. We could barely see, but we couldn't slow down because we knew what would happen if we did. So we just carried on sprinting our hearts out until we heard other paintball guns being fired. So we knew we were close. Joey started shouting to get everyone's attention, and all of a sudden, I heard a huge thud. Joey tripped and twisted his ankle. I turned around to help him, and when I did, I could see the man running full sprint towards us. In that moment, I thought it was going to be the end for us, but our friends heard our screams for help and rushed to us, and when they saw the man, they just started firing at him, and he knew he wasn't going to be able to take all of us and decided to turn around and disappear into the forest. We helped Joey up, rushed to get our stuff, and rushed to our cars. When we got to my friend's place, we helped Joey treat his ankle, and I proceeded to tell my friends everything that had happened. They were all creeped out. It's safe to say that the next time I'm in those woods, I'll be more vigilant.
The story happened when I was in college. There was something about my early years in college that just seemed to bring on a slew of experiences that ranged from creepy to terrifying. I don't know what it was about that time in my life. This experience was somewhere in the middle of that spectrum. Anyway, one night at the beginning of summer, following my freshman year of college, some of my high school friends and I were at a party. We hadn't seen a ton of each other in the preceding year because of us all being away at college, mostly just during school breaks and a few random weekends here and there, so we were all feeling kinda giddy about having the whole summer together. I wouldn't have normally gone to this party, hosted by someone else we went to high school with, but they all wanted to go, and I wanted to hang out with them, so I agreed. This is not the mistake I made in the story. That would come later on that night. We got to the party, and we realized it was almost exclusively people from high school, which was kinda nice actually. It was like a big reunion. Soon my prior inhibitions were gone, and that was only partially because I started throwing back screwdrivers the moment I got there. A couple hours later, I was more than a little tipsy. No, I was full on drunk, though not totally plastered yet, which proved to be my saving grace in the story. After a while, a group of my friends decided to split off. The host of the party, Stephanie, lived in her parents' house still, and it was in the middle of nowhere, basically near a forest. Forests at night both scare and thrill me, so drunk me suggests that we go exploring. This is something my friends would not let me live down, like not ever. So anyway, this group, Lauren, Hillary, Jared, Alex, Hugo, Dean, and hostess Stephanie, plus myself obviously, decided to go on a midnight walk through the woods. It was pretty creepy, not gonna lie, but in a cool way, at least I thought so. A couple people in the group, namely Hillary and Alex, were pretty afraid, but Hillary wanted to go because her best friend was Lauren, and Alex had a thing for Hillary and Lauren, which was a whole thing and not the point of the story. But because of that, they were both there. They kept making comments about how creeped out they were, and I kept telling them to relax. No one else is out here, I told them. Let's just enjoy this time together. Being drunk makes me weirdly sentimental. We walked through the forest for a bit, and then came up to a clearing with a lake and a dock with tall grass and shit, plus a shed and what turned out to be a boathouse, both of which had seen better days. Now, Stephanie and I weren't close, so this was my first time exploring this forest, but Dean and Hugo had before and remembered this place. They mentioned that they thought Stephanie's parents forbid them from coming back there because it wasn't their property, which was true. It was like suddenly, Stephanie realized where we were. I wasn't the only drunk one, and her eyes got super wide and she looked nervous. Not scared exactly, more like she was worried that she was going to get in trouble, and she said that we should go back. I told her everything was fine, since she could totally trust the judgment of a drunk person, and because everyone else was drunk. They all agreed with me, except for Steph, but she was outnumbered and not about to go back alone. Even Hillary and Alex were okay with staying. And because logic is a friend to drunk people everywhere, I suggest we play hide and seek, and most everyone agreed. Honestly, I don't know why people kept listening to me. Now, if I had been sober, this was the kind of place I'd be kind of freaked out about. In a cool way, sure, but not in a let's play hide and seek kind of way. This is where things go wrong. Hugo was forced to be it because we were all assholes and told him he didn't have a choice, so he went into the woods and counted while we all ran and hid. I saw Dean dart into the shed, but everyone else ran into the woods. I decided to duck down in the tall grass, which varied in height. Sometimes I could kneel, and sometimes I had to be on my stomach to be totally concealed. As I was hiding, I heard voices in the trees nearby. Whispers, like the speakers were trying not to be heard. I was curious, so I made my way towards the voices, first on my hands and knees, and eventually army crawling as the grass got shorter. I nearly shit my pants when I ran into Stephanie in the grass, who turned out to be doing the same exact thing as me. When we got closer, we realized it was Lauren and Jared, and that was how Steph and I realized they liked each other. We were listening to them flirt and looking at each other, and I swear we had a telepathic conversation about how good they would be together, but that was when we heard someone barreling towards us through the grass. Heart pounding, I turned to see that it was just Hugo throwing himself down next to Stephanie and me. and he looked terrified. "Hugo, what the fuck?" I whispered because there's no way he counted as high as we were making him. We were being real jerks to Hugo that night. He looked around frantically and then told us what had him spooked. I'll never forget the sheer terror I saw on Hugo's face and heard in his voice. "There's someone in the woods." Stephanie tried to tell him that it was probably just someone else from the party, but Hugo said no. He'd seen a guy and hid behind a tree, and this guy seemed to be in his 40s, and he said the guy looked rough too, and just had a bad feeling, so he booked it. It was just by chance that he found Stephanie and me. "He's looking for something, or someone," Hugo said, telling us that the guy was shining a flashlight around. As if on cue, someone came walking out of the woods, and then called out, "Jim, are you out here?" He sounded kind of angry, and now I felt stone cold sober. This wasn't right, and it was about to get worse because that's when we saw the shadow of someone rowing a boat down the lake towards the dock. The first guy walked onto the dock to meet the guy, Jim presumably, and I heard him demand, "Where is he?" The first guy sounded angry, like he was expecting someone else to be there too, and the second guy informed the first, "I fucked up." They proceeded to argue, though I couldn't hear what they were saying. Then they went into the boathouse. I'm pretty sure no one had hidden in there, but I worried about that, plus the fact that two shifty guys were doing what seemed to be pretty shifty things. We needed to get out of there, I knew that, but Dean was still in the shed, which was too close to the boathouse for comfort given the situation. Lauren and Jared were now making out and totally oblivious, and Hillary and Alex were fuck knows where. Why had I suggested hide and seek? That's what I kept asking myself when I tried to formulate a plan. Then we heard somebody running through the woods, but like they were trying to do it so quietly. I turned to see Hillary. It looked like she was trying to find somewhere else to hide, unaware of what was happening. I saw her run towards the boathouse. It was like time stopped. I didn't know what to do or how to stop her. Honestly, I froze. But then Hillary hesitated when she got close to the door. She would later tell us that the voices she heard inside gave her pause. And then the door swung open. It was like something out of a movie. Hillary was now hiding behind the open door, and the first guy stood in the doorway looking around. I think he must have heard Hillary, who was not being nearly as quiet as she thought she was. If he closed the door from the outside, he'd see Hillary, and then we would all be truly fucked. Luckily, he went back inside and closed the door. We had to get the hell out of there, but we still had to get Dean, Lauren, and Jared, as well as find Alex. We didn't have a lot of time, I didn't think, so we had to be fast. Then suddenly, Hugo stood up, cupped his hands around his mouth, and bellowed. He apparently thought we were in a movie. I just looked at him with a, "What the fuck, Hugo?" expression on my face. It was not what I would have done, but I'll be damned, it worked. Hillary came sprinting towards us, as did Alex, who was hiding behind the boathouse. Likewise, Dean emerged from the shed, and Lauren and Jared detached themselves from each other. The two men in the boathouse heard us too and came busting out, but by this point we were all sprinting away. I swear I never before nor since ran that fast. At one point Stephanie tripped, and I practically ripped her arm out of the socket while pulling her to her feet. The guys chased us for a bit, though I don't know how long, because we kept running until we got back to Stephanie's house. The party was still going, and the men hadn't followed us beyond the woods, but we were all too freaked out to stay. I called my brother to come pick us up, and we all left, even Stephanie, who left her house unattended, except for all the drunk partygoers. We spent the night at my brother's house that night, and we went back to Stephanie's house to help clean up the next day, because honestly, this experience kind of bonded us in a way. Lauren and Jared are now married. Hillary and Alex were both in the wedding. I lived with Dean for a bit following college, and Hugo is one of my best friends, as is Stephanie, which is weird because we weren't really friends before that. But I swear, we thought we were gonna die that night. All of us, except maybe Lauren and Jared. Even Dean heard what was happening outside the shed and was waiting for the right time to make his escape. You can't go through something like that and not come out closer. It's strange, but also kind of nice. Like we have this shared history, which was true before this because we all went to school together, but it's different now. I wanted to go back and investigate in the light of day, but only Dean wanted to go with me, and I thought maybe it wasn't enough people. I was still pretty spooked, though intrigued. Stephanie told us later that she had told her dad when her parents got home that day, and he and a few of his friends went back there and didn't find anything out of the ordinary. They moved shortly thereafter, not because of this, so we never found out what happened, but we've also never forgotten it. I had just turned 20 in March of this year and started to get out more on my own. I was always shy. I never wanted to go out alone, but now I started to feel a bit more comfortable. I just ordered myself a pocket knife. I actually have a few now, and would carry it with me most of the time when I went out on daily walks. This one time in June was the one time I was blessed to have thought of bringing my pocket knife with me. It was around 8 p.m. when I decided to go for a walk. Usually I would try to go in the morning or early afternoon, but it had been raining all day, so my walk was delayed. I put on a light hoodie and was about to head out when I realized my knife wasn't in my pocket. I went back up and got it, then was on my way. My usual walk is about 3 to 4 miles. I'm a faster walker, so I could cut the miles to about 2.5 hours max. I would take this side street to the main road that had a walkway about half a mile before it turned into a suburban area. Before you hit the suburban area, there was a path that cut through a forested area that had a few cabins and parks. As I made my way, I had noticed a figure hanging by a tree on the far side of one of the cabins. I took a quick glance at him and continued past him. For your insight, I'm a trans male and 5'1", so I would get mistaken a lot for a small 15-year-old kid. As I made it to the end of the path, I noticed out of the corner of my eye that the man was now 15 feet away from me. This dude was pretty tall, at least 6'3". He was well built and was wearing torn jeans and a worn hoodie that seemed a bit too big for him. I began to speed up my walking as I turned the corner and shot a quick glance behind me. He was still behind me, just staring at me as he was making long strides towards me. At this point, I was beginning to freak out. He seemed to get closer with every step, and I quickly took a hold of the knife in my pocket and had my finger on the flipper. The next part is burned into my memory for life. I felt a large hand grab my shoulder and pull me back. I have no clue how I managed to quickly whip around and flick open my knife and swipe towards his face. In just a few seconds, though it felt like minutes, the man in a blink of an eye jerked his face back, bringing up his hands as my knife sliced his palm. He let out a pained yell and fell back a few steps, clutching his hand. It felt like I had just scraped him, but his hand was already bloody and a small pool of blood was starting to form at his feet. He looked at me with anger-filled eyes and then took off the other way. I stood there for a few minutes before realizing what just happened, and I went home as fast as I could to call the police. I answered their questions, and then they took the knife to get a blood sample of this dude. I was shaking from this experience and stayed with my brother for a few nights. A few weeks later, the cops returned and told me that they found the guy and that he was wanted for sexual assault. I was shocked and happy that they found this bastard. My knife was also returned to me a few days later. My husband and I were at the supermarket, and our baby was being especially fussy, so we took her out for a quick drive. The motion usually calms her down. It only took about 10 minutes to settle her, and I was still in the store, but was unsure how much longer I would be, and there's poor cell reception inside. He pulled back into the parking lot and waited for me. It was an unseasonably nice day, so he took her out of the car seat and sat her on one of the benches outside the store. He took a business call and had just sat down, absent-mindedly rocking her in the carrier, when a woman, well-dressed, mid-30s, average height, fit build, approached him. It is not uncommon for people to ask to play with our baby. She's got big rosy cheeks, soft wisps of gold hair, and the most adorable, toothless grin, especially when she's deep into a nap. But her nap schedule was paramount, so my husband was preparing to tell the woman she actually couldn't play with our baby right then. She walked over right in their direction, brimming with nonchalant confidence, and before he could even finish his sentence explaining that she was napping and not to be touched, she picked up the carrier and started walking off. He was in shock for a minute, not fully believing someone would be ballsy enough to do something so sinister in plain daylight. So he said, "Excuse me, put her down," as panic mounted. She remained calm the entire time, but when he called after her, she started walking away more briskly than when she approached. He ran full speed ahead and tried to grapple the carrier out of her hands, finally resulting to restraining her arms. The woman yells, "Help! He's trying to take my baby! Kidnapping, 911, help!" kicking him in the shin and pulling a pink bottle of pepper spray out of her bag. Of course, no one in the parking lot was clocking their earlier interaction and assumed that he was really a kidnapper. A lone man in a Deadpool t-shirt versus a teeny well-dressed woman. Immediately, a man knocked my husband to the ground and was holding him down. He could hear bystanders encouraging the woman to file a police report, but she was doing a very convincing job of acting shooken up and insisted that she just wanted to get home. To make matters worse for my husband, she was driving a minivan. He was in a raw state of panic, realizing the entire parking lot had banded together to inadvertently facilitate the kidnapping of our daughter. He was begging and pleading with them, but no one was listening. They just kept screaming at him that the jig was up and he needed to lie still and wait for a police and stop terrorizing a young mother. My husband finally had the novel idea to show them family pictures on his phone, but too panicked to think clearly, this manifested as him shouting, "I have pictures of that baby on my phone," which of course everyone interpreted as him having stalking photos, or worse, pornographic images of the baby. It was at this point that a man, I can't entirely blame this man considering what he thought was going on, kicked my husband as hard as he could in the ribs. It was at this point I was coming out of the store and I thought he was being robbed by these people. I was yelling for security, so panicked my chest constricted and I could barely get any sound out. It was only then I realized that he didn't have our baby with him. When I saw she was being held by a woman, I was relieved. I thought maybe the woman had intervened to move her daughter out of harm's way while my husband was being robbed, and was walking away to get help. I couldn't find a security guard outside the store, so I ran up to people holding my husband down, waving my wallet, pleading, "Take everything you want, just let him up and leave us alone." One of the men holding him down said something like, "Lady, we need to wait for the police to deal with him." I was so confused. Why would muggers have called the police? I just kept stammering, what do you mean? What are you talking about?" And made out someone saying he tried to abduct this woman's kid. I didn't understand and was sure I misheard him. My husband would never hurt a child, and we have 4 kids. If he wanted to commit a crime, bringing home another kid would have been at the bottom of his list. I kept trying to understand what the man was saying, and suddenly, it all clicked. I looked around for the woman who had the baby carrier, and she was halfway across the parking lot. I went into total ballistic tiger cub mode, and literally leapt out on my heels. I sprinted across the parking lot. I'm not a UFC fighter, and I've never even taken a self-defense class, so all I could do was think to grab this woman by the hair and squeeze her throat with my other hand, which didn't do much. She was getting away even as I grappled with her. Amazingly, none of the bystanders had yet connected that my husband was telling the truth and that this woman was fleeing with my baby. I yanked her as hard as I could, and that was enough to make her drop the carrier. So I screamed. I was so scared and surprised that I actually threw myself on top of the carrier, covering the entire thing like a blanket. I stayed that way without saying or doing anything else. The woman left. Not one person tried to stop her, even though she was clearly leaving without the child that she claimed was hers, which would be pretty damn incriminating if I watched the scene unfold. Within the next couple minutes, police had arrived. After all that, there were still several bystanders who explained it as my husband trying to kidnap a baby. The police, to my horror, assumed that she must not have had bad intentions. The first questions they asked me after getting the description of her weren't investigative. They were more questions thinly veiled, trying to convince me not to pursue charges, still placing the blame on my husband. A small sampling. Do your husband and the baby look dissimilar? Is there a chance she thought he was abducting the baby and was trying to intervene? Could your husband have been doing something inappropriate or violent to the baby that would make her feel compelled to extract the baby from the situation? Did she seem groggy or confused? Could she have mistaken either of them as her own family members? They spent more time verifying that the baby was actually mine than they concerned themselves with the fact that the baby wasn't actually hers. My husband had called his brother at this point, who works in the office with a lot of lawyers, and connected with one who gave us the priceless advice to get every officer's name and badge number, to request copies of the store's security tapes right away, and to escalate our complaint higher up the chain if these officers weren't taking us seriously. Finally, we had reason enough to believe we were being taken seriously, and we went home. We were both shook and cried until we had got our other kids from school. My husband was seething with rage and grappling with a feeling of helplessness from how little he was able to do. He also had 2 cracked ribs from when the man kicked him. To the officer's credit, they did ask if he would like to press charges, considering the man was generally convinced at the time that he was on the right side of intervening in a kidnapping, and stayed to talk to the police and apologized profusely when the truth became clear. My husband declined to press charges. Amazing and frustrating, there were still people that stuck around to talk to the police who were giving my husband dirty looks, and one man even implored the police to involve CPS to verify it was actually our baby. For a little background, I'm a scout. I've been a scout since I was 8 years old, and last year I was leader of my team, so I had to do all the paperwork and calls for finding places to camp. It was mid-November. I had to find a place to camp, but since I was lazy, I decided to wait a week before the actual weekend. I decided to call some owners so I could have places to sleep. As I called the numbers, all the owners were unavailable or simply not there. But then I see a number which I never called before, since it was at the end of the list. I call, and the old lady picks up the phone. I do the basic presentation and all. She agrees to let me and the team stay at hers, and we make arrangements. I go to her property to check out everything, such as portable water, the place to put our tent, and the campfire. The place was kind of dark, but it was nice. The week passes, and Saturday arrives. Saturday is ending well, and we did some great games, and ate a lot, and we had a good night show. As I go to sleep in the tent, I stay awake to finish paperwork for the next day. It is now midnight, and I decide to sleep because we have to wake up early to go to church. As I switch off the flashlight, one of my newbie wants to go to the toilet, aka the trees, and asks me to come with her. I can understand because it's better to be accompanied at night, especially in the woods. She does her business, and I suddenly hear some noises far away, but not too far. I tell myself it's nothing, it must be some animals trying to find food. We go back to the tent, and that's when I hear footsteps approaching. As I hear those footsteps, I remain calm and tell myself maybe it's the old lady making sure we didn't put the fire too close to anything. But I still have an odd feeling because it's midnight, and why would she do this at this hour? It goes silent and I don't hear any footsteps for about 10 minutes. Then I hear more coming to our tents. Thankful all of my girls were sleeping because they would have been scared. As I hear the footsteps, which seem to come from one person, I hear others coming from back of the tent, and I was like, okay, this is getting weird. I need to do something. I checked the tent, and thank God, one of my newbies left some embers from the fire, so I could see everything between the fire and the tent. A minute passes by, and a silhouette is just there between the fire and my tent. I stopped breathing. I literally froze. I started to move towards my phone when I saw the silhouette coming closer to the zipper of my tent. I sent a message to one of my bosses, who always camps near the areas, just in case something happens. But I knew she would take too long, so I had to do something, and think fast. That's when I had the idea. I put the alarm on my phone. The silhouette started to unzip the tent, and I actually saw fingers from below. But as the silhouette heard the girls waking up, she or he sprinted back from where they came from. That's when I saw two other silhouettes sprinting back in the same direction. Everything ended well. 20 minutes later, my boss came and stayed the night, and we never had to deal with those silhouettes again, thankfully. Alright, so this happened to me last night. I want to share it with you because it's pretty creepy. For some context, I've been working at a bank for about 7 years, and I've always enjoyed the steady income that it has given me. 2 months ago, I was laid off from my job, and having no other form of income, I began to feel very stressed. One night later, as I put my kids to bed, my heart began to race uncontrollably. I thought I was having a heart attack, but as I began to calm down, I realized that I was just experiencing an anxiety attack. I never knew what an anxiety attack was before I experienced it, so it really scared the hell out of me. The next day I decided to go to the doctor to see what I could do to prevent it from happening again. He told me the best things to cope with my anxiety is to walk as often as I can. Walking releases endorphins, which results in happier moods. I took his advice and decided to walk every night at around 7 to 8. Walking was great. I enjoyed the peacefulness of it and began to meet new people in my neighborhood that I never knew existed. I observed the intricate details in all of the old, well-kept houses. Granite pillars that guided the stone walkways, to the carved maple doors or different sized bricks that somehow fit together to create beautiful walls. The more I observed the houses, the more I wondered about one of the houses that stood out from the rest. It didn't look as well kept as the others. I wouldn't say it looked haunted, but it looked like it was vacant. I never saw a TV glow from a window or a light of any kind. There wasn't even a car in the driveway. It was just existing with other houses. I asked people who lived in the general area if they knew of anyone selling it or if it was being renovated, and no one really had an answer. Last night, as I walked down a sidewalk, I came to the typical street corner that I pass every night when I walk. The corner has an old stone bench, and it faces a vacant house. As I walked, I saw an older woman sitting down on the bench facing the house. When I walked closer to the woman, I noticed the strange attire she was wearing. It was like what you would wear to a funeral. She had on an all-black dress with a black hat and a black veil covering her face. To make the situation less unnerving, I said hello to her, and in the quietest, raspiest tone, she said, "Hello." It sounded like she smoked a lot. Now you're probably wondering why this bothered me so much. Although her demeanor was quite unsettling, the most unsettling thing about her was that after she said hello to me, she crossed the street and walked inside the house that I thought was vacant. It was like she was waiting for me on that night just to show me that the vacant house isn't vacant.
Hey friends, thanks for watching the video. If you have any suggestions for the next video, I would love to see them in the comments down below. Also, don't forget to hit that bell icon and hit on notifications to get notified when I drop a new video or stream. And if you'd like to get early access to my videos before anyone else, please consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a channel member, where you get all that for just $1 a month. Also, I have my podcast now available with my past videos that can be found on all major podcast services. And I got some merch available now over on Spreadshirt. All links to these, my social medias, will be in the description field down below. And remember...